My name is Chris Holcomb, and I am the author of the Hidden Gotham series. I'm going to take you on a behind-the-scenes look at the Double Vice. I got the idea for the Double Vice from something that I remember reading years ago, and I, to this day, couldn't tell you where I read it. I don't know why I read it, and I don't know why I remembered it. Had to have been at least almost 10 years later, because it was before I moved to New York at the time. But I remember reading something about the pansy craze of the 20s and 30s, which was primarily in Chicago and New York. So I was toying with the idea of writing a historical crime fiction novel. I wanted to have queer characters, and so from there I just Googled, like we all do, Googled pansy craze, and fell into a rabbit hole of just great information. And I discovered some great sources by James Wilson, who wrote about queer Harlem, and George Chauncey, who wrote primarily about Greenwich Village and Times Square and the queer community there. And it's been an absolute blast. Just the amount of history that we have, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it, because this was still an illegal act in the 20s. If it was written about in what we would call sophisticated publications, legitimate publications, it was not written about very nicely. If you read the New York Times archives, they weren't quite so kind to us. But the fact is that there's still enough information and photographs to really show this vivid, vibrant community that was living in New York City, and they were going to clubs, owning businesses, they were living their lives, they were dating, some of them even had illegal marriages. It's just been wild to see this in action. And so, I was enthralled with that, and I spent a lot of time researching that, spent a lot of time trying to develop the voice of the main characters. What I didn't have was a plot for the longest time, which for crime fiction is kind of necessary. So it took me a while to kind of stumble into the plot, but when I did, it just kind of took off. So I finally stumbled upon this little factoid that most, if not all, of the queer clubs in New York City were owned and operated by the mob, because they owned all the clubs in New York City. It didn't matter what clientele you catered to. So I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. And then also learning about the Committee of 14. And this was an anti-vice organization that was all about cleaning up the city. And I thought, between those two entities, which had very different purposes, but could basically put the same kind of pressure on essentially an honest group of people. So the one thing is, I don't outline my stories. My life might be easier if I did that, but unfortunately, if I do an outline, my brain goes, okay, great, we've written it already. And part of the fun of writing, for me at least, is a sense of discovery. I have a vague idea of where the story's going to go. I have some shadows of characters, but once I start to write the dialogue, things just kind of snap into focus. And oftentimes, a character I thought was going to be one personality turns to be completely different. And a plot twist I thought I was going to throw in, something else comes out of the woodwork and presents itself as an opportunity that's much more intriguing and much more interesting. And it feels almost kind of schizophrenic to say, but when my characters start talking, I'm not writing, I'm just following where they go, and where they've gone is some damn interesting places. So, but yeah, I can tell you, if you ask me at any point in the writing process, do you know who did it? Or, can you tell me what's going to happen? I can truthfully, honestly answer and say, I don't have a clue. We'll find out together, won't we?